All right, welcome to our free adult guitar live stream lessons. I have Justin Bureau and Doug Kinsella with me, and thank you guys so much for joining me. We've been looking at things basically from the campfire guitar perspective, and what musicians are going to need to know. And today we're doing I'm just getting questions from our volunteers, which should be fun. And if you want to follow this series from the beginning, I put the link into our Facebook comments section, and I think we're on episode number 6, something like that right now. So yeah, go and join along with us there, and I'll be right back with our guests. All right, I got a new system going up, so everything's a little bit fun for me right now. But I'm going to bring my guests on, and thank you guys for joining me. I put us into gallery view so everybody can see everybody. And how are you guys doing today?
Excellent.
Awesome. Oh, and I still have Justin muted. I'm going to unmute Justin. There we go. That's cool. So when I texted both of you guys this morning and said, okay, do you have a question that's pressing? Justin said, well, not really, but I enjoyed the ear training. And also you had some questions about kind of the theory, like chord construction is what I would call it. Like you said, how do you know when they say a D sus2, how do you know what that is? So I think that's a fantastic question. And then Doug, you said, I don't know, I'll think of something. And I said, cool, surprise me. And so did you come up with something, Doug, that you wanted us to dig in a little deeper on?
Sure. So we've been kind of focusing on scales. We've been focusing on figuring out what key we're playing in. And I think the last piece of the puzzle is like almost everything in life, there's some cheater tricks. And that cheater tricks is, to me, how do you put 5 or 6 different licks in your memory bank? Uh, Small riff lasts maybe 6 or 7 seconds, and when you got 3 guitar jammers around a campfire and everybody's banging away the same chords, that you can look like a little bit of a hero or a superstar at the right time.
I love that. That is fantastic, which kind of goes to, um, we call that creative theft, really. And any pro musician knows what I'm talking about, and some of them even talk about it. I think there was a quote. I think it was from Eric Clapton, um, or it might have been Jimmy Page. And he said something like, it was one of those big guys that said, well, I don't know why everybody looks up to me. I've just stole everything from Eric Clapton or whatever, and uh, so yeah, no, that's a great question. And all of these things lead kind of into each other. And, the process of learning to play any musical instrument, it is 1,000 tiny things and pieces of knowledge that all get put together and turned into something. So that's kind of the overarching, framework to put this in. The Doug, I'm going to start with that, and it will lead very nicely into Justin's question because they're kind of different sides of the same coin. So if you have 5 riffs that you love, and I would actually even I'd scale that back to 3, because then
Even better.
you know them. Yeah, yeah, and you had that one guitar solo. How's that for a professional live stream? Just walk right out of frame. Here we go. So you had that one guitar solo that that was something right, ish like that. Which, um, there's 1,000 things that I see that is a copy of. Chattahoochee. That's is in C. It's the same. It's the same thing. They're so then it's how so. Doug, do you have 2 or 3 examples? Like I think that one, that's a killer one to totally keep. Like that's a great one to steal.
Yeah, so I've been working on some variations of that as well, and it is fairly. I mean, I didn't get as elaborate as Chattahoochee, but I was also thinking about if it's easy around a campfire, no different than I've been playing. You go from country to maybe some '80s rock, whether it's Mellencamp or whether it's I don't know. But there's usually more of a rock riff than there is a country riff because the country ones tend to all sound very similar. Not because I'm not a big rock player. Um, I'm just trying to get some tips on what something like that could be.
Yeah, I mean, for jamming around the campfire, there's a couple of categories of songs. Some of them like Bad Moon Rising from CCR. You strum the chords, everybody's happy, right? But then if you look at something like Iron Man from Black Sabbath, probably the worst campfire guitar country song, but I just bring it out. You got to play the riff. You can't get around it. Or Smoke on the Water. You got to play the riff. It's there's you can't play a G chord and sing Smoke on the Water and have people be happy.
Right.
So those are kind of the categories of songs, and I would at first, as you're preparing your kind of campfire repertoire, learn a few songs that are riff based, and but then mostly keep them intentionally to chord based songs. Because the major disadvantage of riff based songs is if you have players playing with you that have never played the song before, there's not a lot for them to do.
Yeah, right. Plus, we've also figured out the level of difficulty in playing a riff and singing the song at the same time, which and possibly containing a beverage or two at the campfire. You mix all the ingredients together, and it becomes a struggle versus
Yes.
just banging on some chords.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm not saying don't do it at all, because sometimes, that song is the song that's the highlight of the night. So, is there any example songs that you can think of that would fall into that category?
Um, Even when I'm playing Tom Petty, because what I was thinking about doing around the fire this summer is once you get the chord progression going, you play a couple of verses, and you've got a couple of guys accompanying you around the fire. It's like, all right, now we'll just stretch this out. You guys just keep playing the same chord pattern, and I'll jump in and try and play something.
And try to
As,
do a solo.
as I've been working through that, everything I play tends to sound very countryish. So I didn't know if there was any tips, like if I'm playing something a little bit more rock, whether it's just the way you take longer to play things. Even when you play your country riff, it's got a very country kind of twang to it.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good, kind of question, because in very broad strokes, there are genre specific guidelines, right?
Mhm.
So, country is going to more typically have a guitar solo that stays on beat. More typically, not it's certainly
Right.
these are not hard and fast rules. Um, Jazz will be very much like that, and I always kind of joke that this is the one jazz timing, the and you do that a whole bunch of times through your scales. That'll get you through every jazz gig. That got me through my 45 minutes of jazz gigs I've been able to do. Um, the the so there are some things like that, and rock solos typically are a little bit more where you're maybe playing beat one and you're maybe finding another strong beat, but you're kind of more flowing over the whole rhythm section that's happening underneath of you, and almost intentionally ignoring the rhythm. So,
Right.
in general guidelines, so certainly anybody listening, these are not rules, these are like guidelines to start you. That would be some of the conclusions that I would draw. Now, one of the tasks that I would actually put to you, Doug, with that is, with this riff that you're doing, with that riff that you're doing, is to see, can you make that work over a rock song?
So,
Right? Something in E minor, because typically the rock songs are going to be in a minor key, and you have those notes,
yeah.
right? So that's actually the big key. So this brings us back to, when you know a riff and you know what key it's in, then you can, what I would suggest is take your three riffs that you have and put them all in the same key. Okay. So you got that one that's in the key of G. So, do you have any like two other riffs that you really know that you like?
Not well enough to broadcast to the world.
Okay. Okay. So that's fair. Let's use two. We're going to go to two, which one is this riff. Okay. And then the other one is your pentatonic scale in E. Okay. Those are in the same key because this is in the key of G major. I'm not making you figure it out. I'm just telling you it's in the key of G major. So you would have those two things to work off of. And then you know what key you're in, which is G major and E minor. You're in both of those keys. And then it's determining, okay, I'm in a new song. What key am I in? Right? And when you know that, then totally you can steal those riffs. So let's take an example where you got me thinking about classic rock, Sunshine of Your Love. And then I figured this out off of some live version years ago, but that's basically D minor.
Okay.
Okay. So how would you take the E pentatonic scale and this riff you know in G and move it to D minor? And then if the Campfire band was playing Smoke on the Water, you might not be able to play the rhythm if you don't know the riff, but you'd actually be able to put in fills.
Yeah.
Right. So can you tell me how you would, what you would play? If can you play that riff in the key of, you know, it's D minor. Okay. So that one is the relative major. So you have to find the relative major for this riff and move it there.
G. You want me to go to you want me to go to D or E minor?
So this is in the key of G and E minor.
And
So
E
it's
minor.
it works for both. And we're looking to transpose everything to D minor.
Not without looking at my cheat notes. I wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, I'm going to throw that one to Justin.
All right. So if that lick is in G major or E minor, you would just drop it down. Let me think. So that's D minor. I could do it with the D minor pentatonic lick, but with the other one, that's a little too much thinking.
Okay, so you're right. You're right.
Down one?
It's actually down 2 frets, 1 whole step or 2 frets. So
Okay.
now your riff, those notes will all work in your D minor.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now the cool part about that, Doug, is all this riff is telling you is what is notes that work. You do not have to play the timing that you did.
Right.
Right? Because remember, we get our control over 3 things: notes, timing, and tone. Right? So this tells you our notes because you're looking for kind of a safe haven, right? But you certainly don't have to stick to that timing.
Yeah.
Is that kind of giving you a little bit? Because I'm not wanting to do what I very easily do, which is go all the way down the rabbit hole. I'm wanting to stay.
No. I think like what I'm going to try and do is, because we usually have about 4 guitarists, and everybody kind of sings and plays their own songs that they know. And then when you're not sort of on task with playing a song and singing, everybody just kind of chimes in. Sometimes people just keep beating their guitar. But I think what I'm going to try to work on this summer is actually not playing. And I'll just sit out the first round like we talked about last week, figure out what everything's in, and then if I'll just quietly try to figure out a riff, and then at the right point inject. Because the killer thing about a campfire that we notice is we're a relatively long duration campfire crew. So to sit around and play for 4 hours is nothing strange. And you take a 3-minute and 30-second average song and you take out all your instrumentals, you take out your, the start and the end of the song, and pretty soon you've got a 2-minute song on your hand.
Yeah.
You got to play a lot of songs in the evening for 4 hours when you're playing 2-minute songs. And
yeah, 15 songs. Yeah, 15 songs is a 50-minute set. That's what the full song. So, you're like 20, 25 songs an hour. You guys are 200 songs deep by the time the evening is there.
That's right. And that takes and it's getting, I should say it's actually getting worse, which is better. But with the advent of phones and at our cabin, we have Wi-Fi down at the fire pit. So everybody's got the lyrics brought up, and it's like request hour, right? It's never ending. And then you have all the chords, so just the songs just roll from one to the other, which is, it's good, but it's also not easy to sing for 4 hours.
Right. Okay. So now here's the tip of the day on this. I don't even know off the top of my head. I feel like it's about 5 tools, but I'm sure if I dug deep, it'd be a bunch more of things you can do when you don't know the song, but you know the key. Right.
Yeah.
So one, one of the really simple things, if you don't know either of those things, is you're percussive. That's it. That's your job. You know, you're supporting the chorus, or supporting the portion of the song that you do not understand clearly. But Doug, something I had shown you in our private lessons was using and you can use either the major or the minor scale. Like so on one string, and particularly in ballads, you have somebody singing in C, and you can actually pick, a note on that scale, and you're kind of making a harmony. And this is a great thing to do when you understand, okay, I'm in the key of C. Now, I don't even need to know the chord progression. I am finding notes that now support the vocal line or the rhythm line, and you don't even need to know the chord progression.
Yeah. And that actually worked with the song I'm working with my daughter. That works really, really well.
Yeah, and it's definitely something cool to add for sure, for sure. So what I would suggest, and I would like to continue the how to steal your favorite riffs conversation in the next one. If you come up with 3 riffs, Doug, for next week, that'll be our topic. I love that topic, and that is how I cut my teeth early on. I didn't understand music theory. That music theory for me was a much later knowledge base. It was, very, how do I get this done kind of learning. And so I would love that as a full topic of conversation.
Well, it just, a couple months ago at one of the lessons, caught the
Suspicious Minds.
Suspicious Minds. Now, as I can't sing that and play it, so when I
Right.
break into the chords in the lessons, you just kept playing it, and I thought that sounds fantastic. So around a campfire, about midway through the season, I'll have one of my buddies train how to play all the chords to that song, and then I can sit there, and maybe if that's all I have to worry about, I can do that and sing, or the whole crew sings, whatever it happens to be. But it sounded so much fuller by just being able to add that little.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. That is what makes bands, is everybody doing their part, much like I understand, not from practical experience, but I understand sports teams work in a relatively similar fashion.
Yes.
That is the extent of my sporty knowledge. So Justin, let's go on to your question a little bit here, which was kind of chord construction. You had asked about like a sus2 chord. Like, why does somebody call a chord a sus2 chord, and what does that mean to me?
Yeah.
Right. So we had done a previous lesson on music theory for campfire guitarists, and the big point that I said was learn your major scale, because the language of music is 100% directed at your major scale, right? So, and then quite easily, people can disagree with what I'm about to say, but this is the Paul Smith way of looking at the world, and music theory is there's the rules about how chord construction actually work, and then there's the way that they're actually applied, and they are slightly different. So in really basic terms, I always like to say that our chords have our 4, just like there's 3 primary colors, right? This was a bit of our discussion before. There's our 4 primary chords, which is major, minor, augmented, and diminished.
Yeah.
And when you look at a chord, and this is great for campfire guitar players to know, when you see D sus2, does it mean you should play D, or should you play D minor, or what else should you do? And pretty well, the way that it works is if you see a chord name, which the most important thing is the first letter. and then whether it's major, minor, augmented, or diminished, and almost nothing else after that really matters. So the sus2 doesn't really matter, or 7, or 9, or all of the 19 other things that can be, because they are a different shade of the same color of chord.
Right.
Does that kind of make sense? Now, so that's the preface. Now let's actually get in and get nerdy, because I know Justin can do that. And so the basics for chords is that we use that major scale and the numbers of the major scale. So in the case of C major, we have C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 is also 1. Right? And we talked about before that your major chord is the first, third, and fifth note of the scale.
Yes, we did.
Right? So that's foundational. And then minor was the first. Do you remember what minor was actually, Justin? Let's test you.
Flat and third.
Flat to 3. So 1, flat, 3, and 5. And then diminished. Let's throw Doug under the bus. Diminished. Does Doug remember diminished?
That's what I got notes for. Flat to 3 and flat to 5.
Sweet. There we go. Nice. Would you agree with that, Justin?
Yes.
Would you have known it?
Yes.
Good. Okay. That's awesome. I'm going to throw Justin augmented.
Augmented would be sharp fifth.
Yes. So we usually say 1, 3, sharp 5. That would be how we would describe it. So then sus stands, because that was the one chord you particularly pointed out, which you see a fair bit, stands for the word suspended. Okay. And sus2, it replaces the 2 or replaces the 3 with a 2. Okay. So it'd be like 1, 2, 5. And this is the formula that works for every single scale. So in the case of C, it's C, D, and G. Okay. And so, and those are the only 3 notes. Now a D, like a D sus2, you'd be more normal to C, where the F sharp is our third note of the scale. So we'd go to an open E to play the sus2. And can you feel how it is, like it's not a resolving chord is what we say. Like it feels unresolved or suspended. Like it's not done. Or sus4 doesn't feel done. Typically you would not end a song on that unless it was a creative choice. Now it typically resolves to the major or the minor. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the cool thing about sus chords is they are neither major or minor because there's no 3.
Oh, all right.
So I saw I forget what movie it was, but I heard this song and I was like, that is the coolest soundtrack ever. And I started to look at it because, of course, I'm super nerdy. And I'm digging into this soundtrack. And this person had written a song only using suspended chords. So nothing was major or minor. And also did not play any chords. So I think he only used the 1, 4, and 5 so that you couldn't tell whether anything, like there was no inferred major or minor in anything. And it just gave it this crazy ambiance. So that, and sorry, I went down a rabbit hole because that was super entertaining for me. But that's kind of the suspended, where now, because I've played major, your ear will be attuned to it, but you can just as easily do it suspended to minor, or sus4 to minor.
That's wicked.
Yeah. So, and that works for, C. There's a C sus2, taking my middle finger off of the 3. And that's how it would typically be used. You hear that all the time. Right? C sus4 would be the 4th note of the C scale to the F, and then resolved to the major.
Okay.
Does that make sense about sus chords?
Yeah, for sure. Like playing in jazz band at school, we always see like it would be like D add 9 and just be like, what's that? Or something suspended fourth. And the teacher's like, don't worry about it. Just ignore it.
Had the
Don't
same
even.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a colleague of mine from years ago who's an avid jazz player said, I went and watched my daughter do jazz dancing and I didn't hear any jazz. Um, the the definition of jazz is kind of so like what kind of jazz are they getting you to play?
It was very well. This year it was for a Christmas concert. So it was just like Christmas songs, but in a jazz context. So like Baby It's Cold Outside and Santa Baby and stuff like that. Just
Sweet.
making it give it that cool swing. And I was on guitar, so lots of just chunking along, promoting rhythm, stuff like that.
Right. So something a person ought not ever do, but is do cheater method jazz. But I'm going to show you how to do it.
All right.
Basically, play everything as a 7.
Yeah.
Right. C7, major 7, or dominant 7. Yeah, and instant jazz, throw in the little same thing. That's your cheating campfire jazz. So okay, so I'm going to give you the kind of quick and dirty definition of how all of that nonsense that you see after major, minor, augmented, or diminished on the chord, how it relates. And of course, everything is based on exceptions, so 7s don't apply to this. But if you see a C6, for example, it's 1, 3, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Add 9 is 1, 3, 5 plus 9. Now, when you look at your C major scale, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you're back at 1 or 8, and then 9. Right? So that would actually be a C with a D in the octave higher. So it's not, there's a difference between a C add 9 and a C sus 2. We want to get super nerdy. Are your eyes glazing over, Doug? Are you following me?
Well, I see those chords when I'm playing. If I go online and look up the chords to song, I see those chords. So I'm just intrigued at what the difference is.
Yeah. So because it's like I'm saying in this example, C sus 2 is C, D, and G, right? Which is different than C, E, G with a high D. That which is then the C add 9, right? Because this is with the D up here compared to very different. Does that kind of make some sense? The place to focus your time, 7s become the most important next chords after major, minor, augmented, and diminished. And 7s, of course, there's 3 variations on 7 with 4 names. Okay. So C7, for whatever reason, whoever made the rule, I'm not sure who it was, is 1, 3, 5, flat 7.
Yes.
Okay. Which doesn't make sense when you look at C6, 1, 3, 5, 6. Why wouldn't it be 1, 3, 5, 7? Yeah. I didn't make the rules. I just teach them. So the basic idea and the explanation that I've heard is that the flat 7 works better in a lot of the melodic, like the melodies that people are using. So it became the more dominant note, and hence the second name for C7, which is C dominant 7. Okay. Right. I know. Yeah, crazy. So then, but then there's also something called a C major 7, which is 1, 3, 5 with the actual 7, which was that kind of funky jazzy chord that I was telling you, that I was showing you before.
Yeah.
So this basically is, I'll do close cam here there we go. And there's my hand. Okay, so this is a regular C that's barred. Okay, and what we need to do is move this note down 1 fret. I can't do that looking in a camera. So this ends up being the fingers that we use.
Right. Okay.
right? And then the actual 7, if you take your middle finger off, and I'm going to try not to do something I shouldn't there. Um, that's the actual 7 as a barred chord. Okay.
See,
Or
I never actually knew there was a difference between major 7 and just 7.
yeah.
Wow.
And the so then that gets us 3 of the names and 2 of the 7 chords. So there's the 7, which is flat 7, major 7, which is with the 7 that's on the major scale, and then there's minor 7, which
Yes.
is, do you know what that is, Justin? Bonus points if you do.
Minor 7th. I don't know how to describe it, but I know the chord shapes.
Okay, let's hear.
So like a G minor 7 would be.
Yep.
And then a C minor 7 is just like the minor chord, but you drop the pinky.
Yep, perfect. And so the reason why those are what they are is that the C minor 7 is the minor chord, right? Because you're playing the C minor chord, but with the dominant 7 or the flat 7.
Okay.
Because you notice that 7 note is the same in the minor 7 as the dominant 7?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So when Justin asks a question, it gets super nerdy real quick. I love it.
Yeah. Well, like I know all of these things. It's like, oh, when I play D and I add my pinky, it sounds cool, but I don't know why. So it's cool to learn these intricacies and to be able to actually say like, oh, it's because it's suspended and it's replacing the third note of the scale with X. Like that to me is fascinating.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And usually it's not that you're never going to see it, but you're probably not going to see an F sus4 very often for music that is written from guitar players for guitar players because it's awkward to play.
Yeah.
Right? Musicians are just like anybody else. I'm going to say kind of inherently lazy, where we do what's easiest and sounds cool the fastest. And that is, because guitar is built the way it is, it changed modern music because we were trying to get things to sound cool as quick as we could. And it turns out, instruments are technically supposed to be built so C major is the easiest key to play. But on guitar, it turns out E minor, way better. A whole bunch of songs and a whole genre of music, i.e. a lot of classic rock, built on E minor.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So then pretty well, with the exception of 7, when there's a number that's added after a chord, you just add that number of the chord in the scale.
Okay.
Then the last one that's really, really important are what we call slash chords. So when you see, G/F, right? And it is actually a backslash. Doug, do you know what that means?
Well, technically I don't. I always thought it was not always, but sometimes I thought it was a filler as you moved from one chord to the next chord. It's almost like you're playing a step where you're playing half of each chord.
That's a good guess.
Yeah.
It's wrong, but it's a good guess. Sorry. There's my
If you know nothing about music, I thought, right?
That's awesome. Justin, do you know what a slash chord means?
Means you add a note to the bass. So like
Bingo.
The slash means over, right? As I think. Okay.
So so if you see G/F sharp, what is the actual core chord?
I think it's F sharp is the actual chord, and then you would wait, actually, I'm having like a dyslexic episode here. Hold on.
You got a 50-50 shot.
No, the first letter is the chord. The first letter is the chord.
Yeah, boom, there you go. So then essentially a G/F sharp is a G chord with a low F sharp. Right? And you can have that expressed in any way. Like you can have C/B, kinda, C/B flat, C/A. Yes, Doug.
So Paul, it's just that single note. It's just
correct.
a single F sharp note.
Yes. Now, one of the things that people don't often realize about that is that when you're reading a chord chart, depending on who wrote it, or if it was written for guitar, are you following a lead sheet or are you following something that was specific for guitar? I, when chords are written, they consider what the entire band is playing.
Right.
Okay, so sometimes what will happen is that, let's say, a D slash F sharp means the guitar player should be playing a D, while the bass guitar player who's holding that low note is playing the F sharp. And that is giving, now it'll also sound good, you know, if the guitar player does it too, but it sounds almost more full when the guitar player doesn't and you let the bass player do their job. So you can't, that's a judgment call.
Right.
So how do you know, Paul, like just in that example, you know, I've got standard G chord and then I'm going to play F sharp. Well, it's above my G. So
Yeah, it's actually, I would say that it's lower. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And now on guitar, I mean, especially on instruments like ukulele where you have 4 strings, you can't actually play the chord as it's meant to be. Like when you get into, you know, 9 chords compared to add 9 chords, you're supposed to be playing 1, 3, 5, dominant 7 plus 9. There's not enough strings. You just run out of strings and there's just no way to do it. So then you have to start skipping notes. But in this instance of the G chord, if you play it where you choke, let's go to guitar cam here. So if you play this where you're actually choking your 5th string, because don't forget, that's an A, right? If you add, like, it'll work, but that's actually changing the chord. So if you choke that string, you have a D and you have a G. You could also, which there's your G, that's the root note. And then if you play the B, you now have the 3rd note of the scale, and then the G, that'd be the G slash F sharp. And generally, you can kind of, you know, take any chord that you know, and even if you're playing, and let's say you're playing a C sharp barred chord, and they say C sharp slash A sharp, get your thumb down or your ring finger down there, and there you go.
Right.
So it pretty well is, think about your lowest note and move it to whatever that is. That's the Cheater Campfire Rockstar way of managing slash chords.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, Justin, when you're in school band, you should be able to now start to add in those other things.
Yeah, for sure. It'll take a little bit of getting used to, because like learning the actual chord shape for an add 9 might be a little difficult, but now that we know theory and like how to build a chord, it'll be really cool to play through the major scale and know, oh, I need to add this note.
Yeah, and my recommendation on that with with learning cool chords like that is actually learn them all as barred chords, because then you can just move them up and down everywhere, and you know the position, right? So you know your C major, you know your C minor, you know your major 7, you know your minor 7. Learn your 6. Go through and think of you know all the susses, like you know C sus 4, right? Sus 2. You learn them all as barred chords. And then all you got to do is remember your chord shape, find your root note, boom, you're done.
Yeah, okay, for sure.
And then you'd be the campfire grand poobah.
Yeah.
So I think Doug probably picked up some extra stuff on that, like, and this is a lesson that takes multiple lessons to really glean things from. And Justin, you've had lots of experience, and also I think done a bunch of study on your own, and so you've had the conversation with yourself multiple hundreds of times.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's 0 people that just come out of the womb understanding this. Like, it just doesn't happen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I struggled a lot with reading music in junior high. So this was a lot of going into high school, and going into jazz was like, okay, I can't fake this anymore. I need to have some kind of understanding.
Yeah, if you're gonna fake music, jazz is not the one.
Yeah, no.
This is a very, very rough translation, but the term jazz came from something, and please don't quote me. Go Google this and find out the actual way. But it was basically they were jazzing up music that the band was bored of playing. That's what happened. It was simple music. The musicians were really good. They were bored, so they jazzed it up for themselves, and it could be argued that in some cases they made it very interesting for musicians to play. And it's better when it's good for both sides, the musicians and the crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a super interesting lesson for me, and I think Doug set out next week's lesson, which is if you come with 3 very small riffs, Doug, they don't have to be big. Like the smaller the better, because then we can actually start stringing things together. And then Justin, if you can do the same thing, like 3 killer riffs that you really love, if you can figure out how to play them all in the same key, that's bonus time. If you can't, it's totally fine, no big deal. And then we go from there, because that art of stealing your favorite riffs and little solo parts is fantastic. I mean, one of the examples that I give is Stairway to Heaven, if I remember correctly. The first riff is that's the first opening riff. And then after I learned that in my youth, and then I started figuring out a whole bunch of other solos, I've found that same riff almost to a T, other than the last slide, in at least 15 other songs. Thunderstruck was the latest one I found it in. The guitar solo for Thunderstruck, it happens a little ways in. And so the artists do it to themselves for sure.
All right, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Any ending questions for you guys?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, me too.
You guys rock. Thank you so much. I will see you next week.
See you, boss.
All right. Have a great week.